In the 21st century, the world is at our fingertips, enabling us to just pick up a suitcase and travel with no questions asked. Just a couple of clicks online, and we're transported across the world to one of the must-see places promoted by the tourism industry. But with a few clicks of the thumb on social media, we can be discouraged from visiting some of the legendary destinations. So what if we chose a different voyage, and instead of going center stage, we went behind the scenes? On August 4th last year, the explosion in the port of Beirut, only 5 hours flight from Paris, brought Lebanon into public awareness. In the midst of the chaos, we stepped through the looking glass and were warmly welcomed by a group of young, committed eco-citizens.
Shamin is my sister. I have called her an hour before to check up on her. And she was like, "No worries, Pam, I'm okay. I'm coming home in an hour." Shamin was never back. She never came back. At 6:07, the first explosion came out, followed by the second one. I just don't know what happened. I just really don't know what happened. I just took my keys. I left my house. We barely had access to our phones. And what I saw was truly disastrous. Shattered glasses, 2 people died in front of me. I couldn't understand what happened. I couldn't understand what happened. I just needed to look for my sister. We finally found a hospital who could take her in. I did not recognize her. She was bleeding from head to toe.
In my view, it was a crime. A crime foretold and planned. Intended to sterilize the city of Beirut and its port, the living, breathing hub of Lebanon. Beirut is the port's daughter.
The story of Pamela, a young employee of a big advertising agency whose headquarters were in this historical building in Beirut, is a story of many thousands of her generation. Beirut's spirit was reflected in these pictures of wrecked buildings and shattered glass.
These stones on that day fell from the second floor. Those are our remainings. I mean, where do we go now? Like, it was my second home. It was my getaway. It was my source of inspiration. It was my day-to-day learning here. And they shattered this dream. It was our future. We were trying to build a future in a very hard country, very, very hard country. And we were trying to fight the system, and we were trying to fight a lot of things in this country. But this, no. No. This is beyond unacceptable. Now, every day I live in fear. Everybody lives in fear every day. Everyone. It's a tragedy, yes, I agree, but it's definitely something that, an event beyond our control that destroyed us. Physically, emotionally, mentally. So now it's about time to recuperate and rise again. Lebanese people have the power to do that. They always did. We will fight the system. We will rise above all odds. and we will live again as well as we all deserve it. And last but not least, my question goes to the so-called government. When is enough for you? Because guess what? We're dying because of you. Beirut is dying because of you.
Since the autumn of 2019, a new civil movement in Lebanon has turned to social media. Eco-citizens of all generations have been using a peaceful weapon to come together, with the aim of putting an end to a dying system, deadly for both the environment and for the population. The death knell was sounded on August 4, 2020, when the port explosion took place.
The awareness about the environment, which wasn't there before, is fantastic. Opening up to the outside world has enabled us to apprehend the importance of climate change, of the environment, of forestation, and the treatment of waste. We've understood what is happening abroad, but here in our country, the government has taken no initiatives.
The seeds of this revolution were sown 10 years ago. Month by month, year after year, we put the pressure on so that the issue of nature and ecology became one of the principal themes of electoral campaigns.
This improvised speech by a member of Hezbollah with the support of Iran outside the barricaded Lebanese parliament shows up one of the major aspects of the protest. The faith-based political system, along with cronyism dating back to the French Mandate, is based on power sharing between the three principal religious communities: Shiites, Sunnis, and Christians. The former Switzerland of the Middle East is unable to pay its bills. The banking regime with its overvalued interest rates has failed. The banks are now blocking the assets of private individuals. The devalued Lebanese pound has become a poor relation, whereas the diaspora makes others dollar-rich. Lebanon is one of the world's most inegalitarian countries.
I'm sorry to say that the collapse has been like no other. That the August 4th explosion, in a way, put an end to a movement calling for change, which had been literally confiscated by the incompetence, to put it mildly, of the government, by the economic crisis, by COVID, and by a regional context, which, in the end, is totally hostile to the survival of this country as we once imagined it.
On the outside, 3 months after the explosion which ripped Beirut apart, and for which those responsible have gone unpunished, the city seems to be carrying on as normal. On the Corniche, families still come for a Sunday get-together, to dive off the rocks and to smoke nargile. Since the beginning of the Syrian war, more than 1 million refugees have crossed the border to benefit from Lebanon's legendary hospitality.
We hope things are going to get better, and that we can return home soon, that we can live like everyone else, and that all the refugees can go back to Syria soon.
Our journey behind the scenes in Lebanon will enable us to come across this younger and more enlightened generation. Its numbers are growing. Architect and landscape gardener Sarah Lily Yassine is part of the Earth Resistance group. She's been leading a relentless and nonviolent hidden battle for years.
This is Dalia Rocher, a rocky peninsula of limestone and flint on Beirut's west promontory. In Arabic, Dalia means vine, and it's said that there used to be vines on this rock. What's special about Beirut and Lebanon is that there are all these water sources and rivers which pour into the sea, creating estuaries, very important ecological zones. Apparently, there used to be springs here at Dalia. And thanks to these springs, which can be seen in photos from the 1950s, there were lots of urban vegetable gardens and vines, which is where the name comes from, the vine. This natural landscape is very important. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I used to come here with my mother in spring and pick flowers. This is what Beirut by the sea is like. So it's a place where the whole of the Lebanese population like to come and visit. It's also a characteristic of the geological history of Beirut. If you look closer at the strata and the limestone, you can see the history and prehistory of the city, and begin to understand that the diversity of the Beirut coastline, in my view, is typical of the diversity of the landscape of our small country as a whole. A fairly narrow coastline and hills which rise up close by, and then a mountain range, a valley, the Bekaa Valley, and then Syria. The variety of both its landscape and its latitude and longitude make Lebanon a hotspot for biodiversity in the Mediterranean region. This country's history has been created by the natural environment, not the other way around.
With Sarah as guide, we go deeper behind the scenes of this country shaped by its natural environment, into the dark caves inhabited by bats, to find an open-air rubbish heap rather than a museum.
It's the epitome of corruption, of a government that has total disregard for nature, for the coastline, for its citizens, which has no system of managing its natural resources, its countryside and its heritage. It doesn't have the vision to educate people and children to look after nature. It's a symptom of the corruption and violence that the state perpetrates on its citizens.
Since 2013, Sarah and other young, equally committed Lebanese architects have been running a citizens' campaign for the safeguard of these ancient rocks. Real estate developers linked to the government wanted to snap them up in order to build a new seaside resort. It needed ingenuity and bravery, worthy of a spy novel, for these young activists and their strong social media network to halt the project.
We found out thanks to a colleague who worked in the architect's office. One day she came across a topographic map of Dalia, and she found out that the project was taking shape. So she took some photos, a bit like a secret agent, and that's how we knew about the development taking place. So we were a few steps ahead. We managed to surprise the developers, the residents and the landlords, and even the architects, really just by chance. You could say that there was something magical in what we did. I was born in 1982, the year of the Israeli invasion of Beirut, so I'm a genuine child of the Civil War. I had no access to the sea or the mountains. It was only thanks to the stories that my Aunt Layla, an archaeologist, and my mother used to read to me at home that I started to appreciate the countryside and nature. And then I got involved in an environmental group. We visited dozens of places in Lebanon, from the Bekaa Valley to Beirut. And that's when I realized that there was more than met the eye. Underneath us, when you dig a hole, you can see where the water comes from and how we come to exist here. Because there's a river and the sea and fertile soil.
It was like an earthquake.
Roland Nassour is not comfortable returning to the scene of the explosion, even if it brought about the first big victory of the Lebanese Revolution. An ecological victory which put an end to the dam project financed by the World Bank in one of the richest regions of biodiversity.
I'm an architect and town planner, but I'm also an environmental and political activist.
This young man of 28 will bear the scars of his struggle all his life.
I was attacked and had my ear cut off. You could say that the struggle for new Lebanon has a price.
Roland Nassour willingly takes us on a tour behind the scenes of the Lebanese capital. The Quarantina district, close to the port where the poorest populations, including refugees, live, was decimated by the explosion. Here, people are waiting outside their destroyed houses, rosaries in hand, for help from NGOs. The government, however, is hopelessly absent.
Of course, I'm an architect, but I can see that the real damage is more on the social and economic level. It's not just the material and physical impact on this district, but the impact on the lives of families behind these walls, with all the social problems which are entailed.
It's boom time for property investors thanks to the rebuilding work. Here, they're called jackals. But militant lawyers and architects like Roland are working behind the scenes to block the jackals and ensure that, out of the ruins of Quarantina, an eco-district can be born, which will also help to preserve peace.
Peace will come about when people's dignity is guaranteed and the environment is preserved. The two are inextricably linked. It's the same fight, the same combat.
Life in Lebanon seems like an endless tunnel, resembling the long water tanker pipes which ensure the country's supply. The shortages affect 1.6 million people in Beirut. In the poorer districts, water is only distributed for 3 hours a day.
Citizens are deprived of direct access to water in their own homes. The way water is managed is a reflection of the country's history, despite the fact that Lebanon, just like Turkey, is one of the reservoirs of the Middle East. It's a very sad state of affairs that Lebanon lets around 1,200,000,000 cubic meters of water drain into the Mediterranean every year. People need this water. It should be retained by dams, but the water networks also need to be efficient. There are some dams which are effective, but others much less so, and water is wasted. Digging quarries are destroying the country's environment and filling the pockets of those benefiting financially from these sorts of businesses.
Stepping through the Lebanese looking glass takes us to the heart of the paradox. A population lacking in water, and yet the subsurface is bursting with it. When talking about political absurdity, the Bisri Valley is a case in point. But it's also the birthplace of Amani. This young Druze woman is another heroine of the Lebanese Revolution.
Even though there are more than 2 million demonstrators in the streets, corruption continues. The latest scandal is going to cost $1,200,000,000, and it concerns the Bisri Dam. It's still in the news. The company is not backing down. Work continues. We say to them, down with the Bisri Dam. Down with the Bisri Dam. We are the barrage to the dam. We are the barrage to the dam.
I grew up in the Bisri Valley.
and lived most of my childhood there. I'm attached to this land, the land of my grandparents. They were farmers. In our family, when the economic situation got worse, my father was forced to close his business. The Bizri Valley was generous to us. We benefited from it. It opened its heart and its arms to us, and to countless other families. We came here and found what we needed to eat. The valley gave us strength. It supported me during my studies, even after the situation got worse.
Today, Amani can cross the barrier and freely enter the dam, greeted by the site wardens. As an activist, an opponent of the state, accused of betraying her country, Amani is now seen as an important whistleblower, backed by the social networks way beyond the borders of Lebanon.
This is where they decided to build the dam wall.
In spite of the potential risks of earthquake, which might be caused by building a dam on a seismic fault. A chanting wall of citizens up against a gigantic billion-dollar project. The population of the Bizri Valley are calling for the site to be classed as a natural reserve rather than have it covered in water and concrete.
The Bizri Valley is a natural resource and a heritage site for the world. There are more than 70 archaeological sites, according to a Dutch study. Among them, we found bridges, temples, the ancient church of St. Sophia. Have you seen all these avocados? There are nearly 6 million square meters of arable land here. It's the only farming valley in the Mount Lebanon Governorate and the second most frequented stopping point for migratory birds. We're talking about a rich biodiversity, which is of great interest for heritage and tourism.
Almost exactly a month after the port explosion, the World Bank announced the cancellation of the loan. In Bizri, the eco-citizens have pulled off a first victory. But Amani and the inhabitants of the valley now face another threat. When forests are destroyed for profit, fire becomes another weapon of corruption.
It's coming down from there due to the wind. Normally fire goes up the mountain. But look, it's there too, on the other side. The wind is carrying it and will bring it down here. There's nothing we can do. I'm going to make a few calls. Can you hear the sound of fire? That's the sound of burning. I'm going to have to ring general inquiries to find out.
Since Lebanese government is unwilling to provide help to the local population firefighting without resources, Amani relays the images that she films endlessly with her smartphone to denounce what she calls an ecocide.
Local people and militants are doing what they can to help the civil defense put out the fire. Soldiers from the Lebanese army have arrived, but there are still no helicopters to come and put out the fires. We're calling for the army to come and pleading with them to send helicopters to the Bizri Valley. The situation is serious and the fire is out of control. The civil defense is trying to contain the fire, but the situation is still very dangerous. The fire is spreading and moving. It's crossed the river. We can't ignore the fact that there's a mafia dealing in wood or coal, which is benefiting from these crimes. They burn the land, then collect the wood in order to sell it. Someone must take responsibility on behalf of the citizens against this wood mafia. I'm not alone. Many young Lebanese people who have lost their jobs have spent whole days on the streets to try and bring down the corrupt government. They've seen their dreams shattered. But we feel we can resist as long as it takes. We're convinced that we can change things, that we can do it. If we unite all over the country, all communities together, we can make a difference. We want to write a better page of history for the generations to come.
Amani, like other young people, has transformed the Bisri Valley into a ZAD, a zone to defend, in case the suspension of the construction work is only temporary. Beyond the struggle against corruption and for freedom, the collapse of August 4th has engendered in the younger generation, which hasn't been through war, a new movement of eco-citizenship which could transform Lebanon.
It was both awful and sublime. We all went to hell and back. Religion didn't come into it. You don't care about that in the moment. When someone is dying in front of you, all you do is just do everything you can to save the person. It's simple humanity in its purest form. For once, we had a common experience. It had never happened before. We're not taught history at school. We're not taught the history of Lebanon. And so for the first time, we had something which united us, a traumatic event which brought us together. And when each person tells their story, everyone has something to say, then I think we create links that weren't there before. And in my opinion, that's going to help change everything.
For a short time, for a few days, a few weeks, we forgot about the blood that was spilt on this land. Obviously, there's still lots of work to be done on the culture of needing to belong to a group. And that's always been our downfall. This need to belong, this culture of belonging to a group, to a political party, to a religion, more than to a country. Education is the key. Grassroots movements are the key. Working with people, there'll be an awareness, a consciousness, and a real understanding of the actual problems. My own revolution started a long time ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, when I decided to no longer fit in with the situation. I decided to try to use cinema as a tool and transform my anger into something positive. That's how I decided to write Capharnaum and come up with the idea of the boy who tries to take his parents to court for having brought him into the world. It's really a court case against the whole world who put him in this situation.
During full lockdown, Nadine Labaki, the multi-award-winning film director, used her talent to help encourage the Lebanese to change their habits and start to plant their own food on their balconies and in their courtyards. She shared this initiative with families in the Lebanese mountains to where the coronavirus pandemic had forced her to flee with her husband, composer Khaled Mouzanar, and their children.
There are some small ants.
Mama, I want to eat the pancakes first.
Okay.
Can we go?
Let's go.
To the Holy Virgin?
To the Holy Virgin, let's go.
Humans need to believe in something bigger than them. For a while, humans believed that nature was smaller than they were, so they stopped believing in nature. Now we're coming back to the idea and understanding once again that nature is bigger and stronger than us. So we're more inclined to revere nature once more. We're growing 3 things on the land here. We've got olive trees, vines. There are 2 varieties of grapes there, and sumac. It's been very hot. Look, all the olives have fallen. We've already lost half of the vines this year because there was a week of extreme heat. And since they hadn't reached maturity, we had to wait, and we lost half the harvest. But the wine is still quite good this year. I feel connected to the history of the people who have lived on this land over the centuries. A very strong connection. So by taking up wine growing and the methods of wine production and so on, I'm carrying out the same actions that have been carried out for thousands of years. By the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, for example. So I really feel closely connected to history by growing both wine and olives. I don't put barriers between myself and nature. Just like these herbs that grow here, I also grew up here. And I feel good. My DNA feels good on this land. I accept my condition of being a living, breathing animal that was born here and will die here. But I'd like to fertilize this soil and not go elsewhere to fertilize.
In a region of deserts, Lebanon is a green oasis. Mother Nature does not withhold her favors here. She can be very kind as long as humans live in harmony with her, do not mistreat her, or disregard her. The country should no longer be considered the Switzerland of the Middle East. The land stretches out from summer to winter, and the mountains are a refuge for its children.
In places where nature was less favorable, as in the mountains, farmers were forced to be more creative. By using all their know-how to invent terraced farming, by using rainwater to grow crops, which would fulfill the needs of local villages and guarantee their autonomy.
In the heart of the Bekaa Valley, this grocery, next to a monastery, is a clear illustration of the peaceful coexistence between communities. This is what's happening in reality, far away from the religious and political rivalries in Beirut.
We don't care about religions. Here is the church, and we are Muslims of Lebanon, and we care of each other, and we don't care for the politics and religion things. We are a family, and a happy family also. The mountains, especially the mountains country, we make all of the foods of ours is healthy. We take everything from the nature and we make our food here. Yes, it's new for me because before I lived in Beirut. It's a city and we don't have any idea like this. But when I married and I live here, I learned. All the things of city is have colors, additives, and we have some high percentage of cancer in Lebanon, and it's from the polluted food. And especially with Corona, too much people they search for the healthy food, and they come to others. And also when they see us do like this, they like this product.
Michel Scaf is the heir of one of the big landowning families which took over at the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Today, he is an activist for the preservation of the environment. On the millennial lands, he fights for the conservation of nature and ecotourism as a means to counter climate change and the dwindling of water resources.
Look at those trees over there. European oaks, all of them. They're not local. We also have cedar trees, too. This track only used to be accessible for the water source that I'm going to show you. But it was widened in 1982 during the Israeli occupation. And now we use the road for ecotourism. There are some great morning walks to be done. Look how beautiful the mountain is. We're at the end of the season now, and so there's not much water left. Look at all the bullet holes in the door.
So fighting for water in war and peacetime is an old story.
Absolutely. And it's going to get worse, especially as water becomes, unfortunately with global warming, you can see that normally there should be more water here. We're on the border with the desert. If we give up, the desert will take over, and that's a real worry. We want to conduct what we call grassroots diplomacy. This means implementing conservation and showing that conservation has a positive economic and social benefit. It's not just diplomats signing documents who will save water. That sort of diplomacy has never worked. That's all in the past. Louis XIV is long gone. The more we tamper with the environment and look after it badly, the bigger the influx of refugees into Europe.
Lebanon is a small country, no bigger than Northern Ireland, and less than 100 years old. It's been caught up in the wars waged by its neighbors and still carries the scars.
In my humble opinion, there'll be no sustainable development in military conflict zones. From the end of the 20th century up until today, I have the feeling that the conflicts in these zones have got worse. They're identity-based, social, cultural, or religious conflicts, or sectarian conflicts within religions. In those cases, fighting over land is not a progressive struggle concerned with human development, nor with the good of the planet, nor with the equal distribution of wealth. The idea is simply that the more one particular community can possess land, the more it can dominate a country.
What I'm calling for is for Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan to work together on a water management policy in order to carry out a balanced and peaceful governance of the water situation, to get away from the militarization of the fight over water and from the unilateral management by each country, which is what happens now.
However, and we've seen this in Syria, the political classes, the ones we call the kleptocracies, are capable of destroying a country just so that they can stay in power. It's a very dangerous game, but it worked for the Syrians, and it worked also in Egypt with the coup d'etat, etc.
A makeshift roof held together by staples. This scene was filmed by chance during a visit to one of the Syrian refugee camps in the Bekaa Valley. It shows what's really going on. a temporary situation that has gone on too long. Since the beginning of the war in 2011, just 80 kilometers away on the other side of the mountain, most of the refugees live in provisional camps. The government does not want to set up official camps.
We're coming to the camp. It's just here.
Thanks to innovative solutions, NGOs such as Solidarité Internationale are trying to prevent access to water becoming an issue of conflict between Lebanese communities and the refugees.
I'm going to look at the water inside to see if it's clear, if it's drinkable.
But behind the scenes, the reality is here in the bed of the Litani River. It crosses the Bekaa Valley for 140 kilometers before flowing into the Mediterranean.
How long have you been living in this camp?
Some have been here for 6 years, others 7 or 8.
Has the Litani been like this since you've been here?
Exactly. It was even worse before. We need to find a solution for the river problem. People come during the night and dump trash in it and then run away. There's nothing we can do. We wake up in the morning and discover what they've dumped.
Initially, the problem was that people came a long way just to throw their rubbish here. With the arrival of the refugees and the spotlight shown by NGOs and the HCR, more and more agencies are dealing with this, finding solutions for sanitation and cleaning up.
It would seem that migration does have some positive consequences for the environment. Meanwhile, food insecurity is what is on the minds of these housewives. The economic crisis has plunged half of the Lebanese population under the poverty line, creating a community of the underprivileged, regardless of their country of origin.
This is why the contribution of the international community is vital. Their role is to offer immediate solutions to urgent, essential, basic needs, but also to help the population to become resilient in the face of the economic crisis, obviously, but also climate change and all the consequences that go with it.
By going behind the scenes in Lebanon, we were able to cross paths with Ahmed and his family, starting with his young daughter, Fatme. We were totally blown away by her hopes for the future and her desire to drain the cup of life to the last drop. Having survived the bombing in her own country, on the other side of the mountain, Fatme is demanding the most legitimate of rights for a child, to go to school.
I want to be a doctor, and I'll be proud of it, because when our loved ones fall ill, no one looks after them. They're forced to go to hospital just so that they pay, and yet we don't even have money to buy medicine.
Is it possible that a new generation, beyond the frontiers of war and religious sectarianism, can lead a dance of hope for Lebanon? In this pilot farm, the dance has already begun. It's called Buzuruna Juzuruna. Our seeds are our roots in Arabic.
Here we are.
What beautiful gardens.
The main activity of the farm and the not-for-profit is firstly production, conservation, and the reproduction and diversification of local seeds. We're also a farm school, which means we teach classes and we run training sessions, notably in agroecology. This includes the production of compost, of biopesticides, of organic transgenic plants, such as garlic and peppers. We don't use chemicals. And also producing seeds, and how to preserve them, how to reproduce them, and everything related to all these activities. The idea of food sovereignty is absolutely vital to us. Producing local seeds enables farmers of all kinds to move towards self-sufficiency. It means that they are not dependent on imports, which in our context is incredibly important. The proof of this is that many people who were relying on imports for their farm production have huge problems with currency values, and they're finding it difficult to get hold of even basic products. So once again, this shows that self-sufficiency is the way forward in order to live with dignity. We have everything to hand, and since that's the case, everything is more accessible. This means that the model itself is replicable fairly easily. You still have to put the work in. It's not just for fun, it's serious work.
Here we are.
The rose juice that Walid, a Syrian refugee, and Serge, co-founder of this atypical community, are sharing is highly symbolic. Roses don't just protect vines from diseases, but they also protect humans from prejudice.
In Syria, the main reason for the revolution was agriculture. It started in 2008. The farmers were oppressed. The state wanted to impose certain seeds on farmers. The farmers were not allowed to produce and grow the seeds that they wanted to. Only those who were able to keep hold of seeds inherited from their ancestors were capable of providing for their needs. As farmers, we prefer and believe in local seeds. A new generation is protecting the seeds so that they'll always be available. There's a natural relationship between the farmer and the seeds. There's humanity, love, and an optimistic vision for the future.
In the midst of civil war in 1978, the domain of Kefraya decided to make its own wine, thus also choosing to drain the cup of life to the last drop and trust in the future of local Lebanese agriculture. Today, Kefraya has 300 hectares of organic vineyards. The domain manager, French wine expert Fabrice Guiberteau, staked everything on ancient Lebanese grape varieties resistant to climate change.
A vine is something that is cultivated, but above all, it's a symbol of the tree of life. Here we have a plot where we're growing a local grape called Aswad Karesh. It's a homegrown red Lebanese grape. This year in particular, I noticed that the Aswad Karesh, as well as the Azmin Noir, both resisted well to the extreme heat that we've been having. I was unable to harvest some plots, notably the Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon, because the grapes were completely burnt. When I arrived at these plots here, the grapes were still intact. Look, this is a bunch that was forgotten after the heat wave. Most of the grapes were more or less burnt, but here we can see that there are still some beautiful grapes. This bunch had been forgotten, but it's magnificent. And these are Lebanese grapes. They're tasty, and they're atypical, with ripe seeds. The seeds are perfectly ripe. We work with the vines, we work on making wine, and we take what nature gives us. So we just have to accept the good years and accept the less good years sometimes. It's true that our vineyards in Kefraya are not irrigated. It's true that our yields are quite low. But nowadays, it depends on what one's looking for. The aim is quality above all else. So you have to adapt, that's all. And the land in Lebanon is nothing if not adaptable. Lebanon is a first world wine country. Remember that the Phoenicians were the first to transmit the culture of wine growing and winemaking to the rest of the Mediterranean region. There's a lot of history to discover. And today, there's a lot of research based around that. And these grapes are part of that. So if the vine is genuinely the tree of life, it will keep its symbolism and its rightful place. Remember that a vine is rooted very deeply in the soil. And that's why this Lebanese culture is here to stay, to take root and go even further, drawing its very essence from the heart of this rich land.
The German poet Silesius said, "The rose is without why. It blooms simply because it blooms." And I like the idea of not being constantly torn between thinking about, on one hand, the beauty of a sunset on a postcard, and then about the horror of buildings collapsing. In the end, someone who stands tall when all around is collapsing is the definition of beauty.
Kartaba, a village in bereavement after 3 young firemen from the same family died in the port explosion in Beirut, is where Miguel decided to return to look after his grandmother's garden. A return to nature is a pledge for the future for this talented computer studies student. Miguel picks roses for his grandmother every day, as did his grandfather, because roses symbolize hope. Beauty may be born out of chaos if we just open our eyes.